Let's hit something, world. This is AJ with tips and tricks. Today we're going to shake things up a bit. We're talking about something a bit more technical than usual, which means I'll be taking a back seat. More specifically, I'm going to be switching places with the man that's presently behind the camera. In today's episode, we're going to take a look at making our own microphone cables. I'm going to turn things over to my drum tech, videographer, co-architect, co-designer, and, as it were, my father, Jeff Nystrom. You usually see his name at the end credits for his help with filming and manning the teleprompter, but for the next two episodes, you'll be able to put a face with a name and learn a bit more about the technical aspect of my setup.
There's an old saying that goes something like this: you get what you pay for. One reason behind AJ asking me to do this episode of Tips and Tricks is the fact he got burned by buying inexpensive microphone cables when we were first miking up the kit. They were standard XLR male to female cables, alright, but the quality of the signal, or lack thereof, made it clear these cables were destined to join the scrap heap. The copper strands were virtually non-existent, and it seems the cables had been sitting around in a damp environment, since after a CSI-type investigation, I determined that the copper conductors had oxidized severely. I did some research online and found Mogami.com. They offer high-quality number 22 gauge balanced microphone cable. We ordered a couple hundred feet with part number W2549 in red. Also comes in black, yellow, green, and blue. Your choice. When it arrived, we cut it into various lengths based on our needs for the kit. I also ordered Amphenol XLR male and female connectors from Mouser.com. The Amphenol part number is 523-AC3M for the male plug and 523-ACF for the female receptacle. I found these to be very easy to work with, and the fact that they have a strain relief feature integrated within the connectors made me very happy. Now that we have the materials taken care of, let's address the issue of soldering and safety. I've been an electronics technician instructor for, let's say, several years. I'm hoping that this is not your first experience with a soldering iron. What you do need is a decent soldering iron available from your local electronics supply store. I personally do not recommend the gun-type soldering iron that gives instant heat that can be difficult to control. My soldering iron is a temperature-controlled workstation model that has served me very well. You do not need to get that fancy. I do hope you get a stand for your iron to keep your hands, etc., away from the heat. As I tell my students, respect the heat. Don't fear it. It's about 700 to 800 degrees that you're working with. Safety glasses are a necessity, as well as because molten metal is involved. We've broken this down to several steps that are easy to follow. In step 1, we want you to decide how long your cables need to be. We cut some when we got our cable at around 10 feet and others at 20 feet. Cut the cable with a good set of diagonal cutters. And you'll have the cable ends to look something like this. In step 2, let's prepare the cable ends for the connectors. First, carefully strip the outer insulation using a utility blade. I'm going to cut about 1 inch off of this. All I'm doing is slitting the outer jacket. Don't cut too deep because we don't want to damage any of the conductors inside. Slide the insulation off, and this will expose the outer shielding, copper shielding. In step 3, we want to unwrap all the shielding strands and twist them to form a shield. As you recall, they were wrapped around the conductors here, so I'm carefully gathering all the strands. There's one there, making sure I have all of them. You're going to gather those together and form a conductor. We have a conductor shield right now. In step 4, now you'll see 4 more cable strands inside. 1, 2, 3, and 4. There are 2 that are actually clear on this Mogami cable that I need to cut off. They're just filler strands to help give the cable some body. There is no copper inside of them. And what that's going to leave me with is a clear cable with copper in it, a blue cable, and our stranded jacketing from the outside. You will now have the shield wire, a clear copper wire, and a blue wire. We want to strip off about 1/4 of an inch off the clear and the blue with our gauge strippers. Next, we want to take those wires and strands, twist them nice and tight together to form good conductors. Step 6, we will need to tin each wire with the soldering iron. This applies a thin coating of solder to each conductor, make it strong, and provides a good connection later on. This process needs to be done for every cable that you're preparing. The last step is to solder the Amphenol XLR cable connector onto the wire. Determine which end you're making first. I've already made up the male end here, and we're going to finish up the female end. First thing you have to do is slide the protective cover on the end, which is also going to be housing the strain relief, and make sure you have that going the right direction as well on the Amphenol connector. If you forget to do this, you've got to tear everything apart next time down. I'm just going to get those out of my way. The next part is the actual female connector, and we're going to put that into the device here. Before we join any of the wires, we have to tin the connections on the connector. That's by adding some solder to the actual cups to fill them, so that your cable wires will make good connections. You are now ready to complete the cable end. Upon close scrutiny, you'll see that the male connector and female cable ends have pin numbers molded into the connector. Obviously, the male and female are opposing pin locations for mating up to your microphone and audio snake or mixer input. We will wire both of our cable ends as follows. Pin 1 is your shield connector. Pin 2 is your blue or number 22 gauge wire. Pin 3 is your clear copper cable. Pre-tin each cup as I just did, and I'm ready to solder them in. Pin 1 is my shield wire. I'm going to heat the cup, slide it into position. Pin 2 is my blue wire. Heat the cup. Slide the wire in. Allow the solder to cool on each of these connections. And the last one is my clear with copper going into position 3. We have our solder connections all made. Now it's just a matter of finishing the actual cable connector. We have the last part to go on. Slides on. This is what I like about these connectors. Mates a connector. Bring your strain relief up into position. A little key on here somewhere. This will actually squeeze right in on the cables. And the last is your finish housing. And you have your finished cable. But we're not done yet. The last thing I always like to do is to check them out with my ohm meter. Make sure that we have continuity or a connection between all the connections. So we're going to be what they call ringing out the cables. We want a connection between pin 1 to pin 1, between pin 2 to pin 2, and pin 3 to 3, and you'll have a good cable. Got a connection there on pin 1. Got a connection on pin 2. And I got a connection on pin 3. So we have a completed microphone cable with a female connector on one end and a male connector on the other, and you've completed your own microphone cables.
Thanks for watching. Next week we'll dive into making our own subkick or transducer. Until then, live right, drum well, and have fun. I'm AJ Nystrom, and I'll see you next week.